So let's go to taxes, though. So we're talking about this healthcare thing. The taxes in the state of Arizona alone have gone up, I don't know, another 5, 10, 15% since the recession started. What are you going to do as a U.S. Senator to be able to correct this?
Well, keep in mind that my purview is not on state law, but rather on federal law.
Right.
So the objective is to simplify the tax code and to eliminate taxes. So as an example, one advantageous thing for us as a people would be to cut the corporate tax rate, to hold the line on the capital gains tax rate, to keep that as low as possible. 15% might be a reasonable number that would be in line with what we need as a country.
Isn't it supposed to go up to like 35?
Yes, yeah, that's one of those tax cuts that's supposed to expire and sunset that's going to raise it. And that's not going to be good for business or for jobs.
But on the federal level,
yes,
it looks like all taxes are planning on going up the 1st of January.
Well, if you look at the things that are happening, that's a planned event because you can't continue to spend the way that we've been spending over the last couple of years without raising the taxes. So I'm opposed to those raises, and we need to cut expenses instead.
So what do we do? How are you going to do that?
Well, here's an interesting piece of information we should keep in mind. There's about 3,500 bills on an annual basis that go through the Senate. All of those are additional regulation, additional impacts to us as a people. So one of the things that I can do most effectively immediately is to find other individuals that can line up on a constitutional position on correct principles and values and block those bills and say no to them. So anything that we can do to bring in freshman senators or freshman congressmen and those kinds of things that are changing this year in the midterm elections, that will be advantageous because it creates an opportunity to find individuals that will hold the correct values and principles and say no. To say no to government encroachment, to say no to new taxes, to say no to new programs, and to stop things that are happening to us.
Slow them down.
Yes.
Please, just slow them down.
It's a runaway train right now, and we really need to have some individuals that are willing to say no and then make hard decisions to cut expenses and to cut programs.
Well, and then here's some egg on somebody's face because, like you said, the trillions of dollars that have been spent over the last few years to try to pull us out of this thing that was started. How is it going to be paid for if the taxes aren't raised? How is it going to be? We're going to borrow more from China. We're going to go to the printing press and print more money. I mean, how is it going to be paid for? I mean, if you talk about scaling down the government, the programs, of course, are part of the government because so many federally mandated programs are in existence now that I'm sure that it's going to be the little guys down at the bottom of the barrel who are going to get chopped off at the knees first. That's not going to be the big oil corporations or, General Motors or any of the big banks that have been getting the bailout money and everything else. So how are you going to balance the books by not raising taxes? Because at this point, it doesn't look like there's any other way to me. I mean, I don't know.
No, you're right, but we have to keep this simple. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. You have revenues coming in, which is from taxation or from borrowed funds. Unfortunately, we're borrowing a large sum of money, and 40% of what we spend comes from borrowed dollars.
Yeah.
We are so far out of control. We have to learn to say no.
You mean the loan sharks?
Not only to the loan sharks, but to the addictions that we have for programs and benefits and entitlements.
Yeah.
Until we can say no to all of those things and cut our expenses, it really doesn't matter how much revenue we bring in because we're always going to exceed.
Yeah.
We have a habit as a nation of spending more than we bring in.
Yeah.
That habit must change. It's not a question of raising taxes because you have many that want to raise taxes more and more and more and more. That's not the solution. The solution is to rein ourselves in and to say no and stop spending so much.
And can you do that as a senator? Is that possible? I know you're one little voice in a big room.
I am, but you have to remember the role too. House of Representatives is tied to taxation. That's where it sits. So the Senate does have influence and does get to play in that back and forth that occurs between the two sides of the Congress.
Yeah.
But in reality, Congress has the purse strings.
Yeah, and there's no way that you can get them out of their hands except for veto it whenever it gets to your chamber.
But that's also the way that it's structured. So
yeah,
you have to be able to have impact and influence when you don't necessarily have title control.
Yeah.